Hello, welcome to this ICN training module on competition assessment. My name is Michele Pacillo from the Italian Competition Authority, where I work in the international office.
And my name is Molly Askin. I work at the Federal Trade Commission in the United States in the Office of International Affairs.
This is the first of 3 short modules, each lasting 10 minutes, on competition assessment.
Why a module on competition assessment? Because it is an important part of the competition advocacy function. Let me remind the audience that there is a dedicated ICN module which discusses competition advocacy more generally, titled Competition Advocacy.
Perhaps a good place to begin with this module is by defining precisely what we mean by competition assessment. According to the ICN recommended practices for competition assessment, which are available in English, French, Spanish, and Arabic languages on the ICN website, competition assessment is a review that identifies proposed or existing policies that may unduly restrict competition and evaluates the policy's likely impact on competition. Indeed, a significant part of advocacy activities of many competition authorities is dedicated to addressing public restraints on competition.
Let me jump in here to stress that these competition assessments or reviews can take many forms and have many variations. It may range from recommendations supported by general economic theory to more resource-intensive competition impact assessments, which aim at quantifying the costs of the policy through empirical analysis. A competition assessment may also be based on existing studies or on enforcement experience of the agencies themselves. Regardless of its form, a competition assessment can include advocacies, as well as provide a foundation for, or be an input into, later advocacies.
Indeed, let's not forget that through competition assessment, competition agencies should accomplish at least 2 tasks. First, urging policymakers to consider the likely impact on competition of the proposed policy when deciding whether this policy is appropriate. And second, identifying whether justifications exist for any restrictions on competition. There is an additional task demanded to competition assessment, and that is, where possible, to include suggestions for alternative approaches to achieve the policy goals, while reducing at the same time restrictions on competition. In other words, competition agencies should be more proactive, or could be more proactive, and suggest policymakers whether less restrictive alternatives would achieve the intended public policy goal. However, being proactive means more resources involved, and this is not always possible. But let's start from the first task: how to urge policymakers to be competition-minded.
That's not easy, Michele. Policymakers may not regularly consider or assess the impact of their proposed policies on market competition for 3 reasons. First, they may have to balance a wide variety of public policy considerations, and as such, government and legislators may consider competition as a secondary concern, or one among many. Second, even if they make an attempt to consider competition issues, they may only do so at a late stage of policymaking, as competition remains a secondary concern. Third, they may not have sufficient expertise to make a thorough competition assessment.
For instance, this can be the case of public procurement sector. Despite the economic relevance of this sector, it accounts a good portion of the GDP in many ICN jurisdictions. Procurement officials have often no or little expertise in recognize the potential signs of abnormal behavior in tender procedures, and more importantly, in designing tender procedures in order to minimize the risk of collusive behavior. The legitimate objective of procurement officials is to ensure the continuity of the procurement and terminate the tender procedures as quick as possible. For these reasons, many competition authorities devote significant resources in capacity building activities towards procurement officials.
Thanks, Michele, for that excellent example. So what does it take to accomplish the first task, urging policymakers to be competition-minded? A mix of factors, including some institutional circumstances, may prove very conducive to a competition-minded environment. In some jurisdictions, the legal framework itself already provides for a clear process for drafting and adopting new policies with appropriate periods for review and comment by interested parties. This process may also include written procedures for considering a regulatory impact assessment of proposed policies. For instance, in jurisdictions such as Colombia, Finland, France, the Gambia, Greece, Korea, Mexico, the Netherlands, Portugal, and Spain, there is a specific legal basis for the competition agency to conduct ex-ante competition assessment, and in some of them, for example, Colombia, the Gambia, Korea, Portugal, and Spain, the ex-ante competition assessment is compulsory.
In other cases, there might not be a clear process or specific regulatory impact assessment exercise required, but the competition agency, or where applicable another government body, may have the appropriate legal authority to conduct competition assessment upon referral or on its own initiative, which could include a formal role for the competition agency to offer input early in the policy drafting process. For example, in Canada, the government body may choose to consult a competition bureau, but it is not obliged to do so. Similarly, in Israel, the competition authority is consulted on a case-by-case basis at the discretion of the responsible body. In several other jurisdictions, such as Bulgaria, Canada, Finland, France, the Gambia, Israel, Italy, South Africa, Sweden, United Kingdom, United States, and Zambia, the mandate for competition assessment of competition authorities derives from a general legal basis for agencies' advocacy activity.
In absence of formal involvement, competition agencies may seek other avenues to express their views to members of government, the legislature, or other bodies, for instance, through hearings, studies, or offering informal opinions. This is possible in several jurisdictions mentioned by Michele: Canada, Colombia, the EU, Finland, France, Italy, Mexico, Russia, Spain, Switzerland, and in the United States. In some other jurisdictions, you may find explicit commitment by the relevant government bodies to consider competition assessments and any accompanying recommendations from competition authorities.
An example comes from my country, Italy. According to a law enacted in 2009, every year the government is asked to present to the Parliament a liberalization bill, taking into account the opinions and the recommendations delivered by the Italian competition authorities in the previous years. Therefore, since 2010, the Italian competition authority has submitted every year to the government a report containing all its advocacy proposals. In any event, regardless of the institutional arrangements which may vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, what is crucial for the success of advocacy action remains an early involvement of competition agencies in the drafting process.
Another important element contributing to building an environment favorable to competition assessment is transparency. First, being transparent in how agencies conduct competition assessments can include seeking input from stakeholders along the way and publishing formal, final competition assessment recommendations. In addition, publishing any material related to that competition assessment, which could include press releases, articles, speeches, and interviews by agency staff and leadership, can significantly contribute to transparent competition assessment processes. This can be a powerful tool to spur a public debate about how proposed or existing regulations impact competition and consumers. And also, it can be the basis for engagement in discussions with government officials and decision makers, including the legislator or in other governmental bodies.
Molly, you are bringing here a very important point. I would go further to say that transparency could also be used as a tool to provide guidance and to promote compliance. In other words, competition agency should develop guidance or tools for conducting their own competition assessments, or provide support for others to engage in assessments, relying on existing tools such as the ICN and the OECD Competition Assessment Toolkit. Such guidance or tools may help policymakers identify the main issues to address as a part of a competition assessment. They may also serve to encourage policymakers to conduct in-house assessments of the proposed policies where relevant.
When the competition agency drafts guidance, it should explain the main aspects and steps of competition assessment, when it is desirable to seek an opinion from the competition agency, and the general substantive criteria used to conduct the assessment. It may also describe the types of provisions that are likely to restrict competition, how those restrictions can be avoided, and how less restrictive measures could achieve the same legitimate public policy goals.
We will talk about all these aspects in the third submodule.
Thank you for joining us for this competition assessment module.
Thank you.